Welcome back, listeners, to our podcast We Are Listening, which is dedicated to enabling natural healing for you and making you more aware about its benefits and how it aligns with you. I'm your host, Pulkit Garg, and in today's episode, we venture into the delicate yet crucial terrain of addiction and the profound impact it has on families. And before we unravel the complexities of this subject, let me share a couple of anecdotes that highlight the challenges families face and the transformative power of assistance. Imagine navigating the defining waters of addiction and finding a guiding hand to lead both individuals and families towards healing. Our speaker today not only understands the intricacies of addiction but has dedicated her life to supporting families in their journey towards recovery and resilience. So, get ready for a conversation that delves deep into addiction, the ripple effects on families, and the hope that springs from understanding and compassion. Welcome, Sangita.
Thank you, Pulkit. Thank you very much for having me here.
So, Sangita, can you share one anecdote or one your experiences where you were helping a family to recover from the depths of addiction?
Yeah, sure, Pulkit. Rather than sharing about my work, I would like to share my personal experience. So, I have grappled with the addiction of my loved one, and this was many years ago, almost 25 years ago. And with the taboo that is associated, the shame that is associated, I was struggling with it all on my own. It was almost like I was in a deep pit, a dark hole, which was where it was very gloomy, where there was despair, there was no hope. My loved one was also battling with addiction, and he was also fighting his own demons. And for years, this went on with absolutely no, glimmer of hope for us. And then, when after almost close to a decade, there came hope in the form of a support group, in the form of somebody who has already been through this and is today out of it. It was like a miracle for us. For me, it was almost like, wow, I'm not alone in this. There are others, and there is hope that we can get out of it, and there is help available for me. So this was the journey that started with a very personal experience for multiple years. And then when I got into biography work, coaching, I realized that this was a space where I could really, really help others. This was a space where I could be that hand, which helps the other come out of that dark, pit or that black hole. So, yes, I think, especially with the taboos attached, it's not easy to talk to our parents, our relatives, our friends. There's a lot of shame. So, we try to keep it to ourselves. But when the more we talk about it, the more we understand that there's help available, I think there's more hope for these families and for the addicts also.
I totally agree with you. When it comes that hope is a very strong emotion and in itself an essence to have. And people have turned the world around when they have hope. So, I would like to understand
Yes, absolutely.
this particular aspect that yes, having an addiction of anything is a taboo in our society and it's very difficult to, communicate about it even if the person going through that addiction
Yeah.
wants to reach out for help because of this taboo, the stigma that surrounds of being an addict, he or she is not able to even reach out to be it family's image,
Yeah. Yeah.
respect, xyz factors. So how does understanding the nature of addiction contribute to a more compassionate approach in supporting the affected individuals and their families?
Yeah, I think you've used the perfect words, this compassionate approach and understanding the addiction. Because, for most people, and it was something that held true for me too, it was like my loved one who's an addict does not have the willpower, and hence he is not able to overcome this. Or my loved one does not care enough for the rest of us to let go of this addiction. And later, when I understood what addiction actually is, like there are so many factors that are contributing to the addiction. I can just list out very quickly a few like genetic factors. chemical imbalance, dysregulation, inability to regulate your emotions, lot of there could be trauma, there could be negative experiences which the person doesn't know how to deal with. There is escapism from the outside world which seems to be very harsh and which does not seem to understand. So there are so many things that are in different cases, it is different, that are contributing to this. Now, when we talk about something like, when we talk about cancer, when we talk about diabetes, we are so understanding of that patient. We are so understanding and sympathetic, and we do everything we can to help. But the moment it is an addiction, in most cases, it is like there is so much disrespect towards that person. There is so much, again, I would like to use the word shame and taboo. And also for the families of, that person, that, I think it's a vicious cycle, which is really making it worse for all involved. So I think understanding what this disease is a huge factor in building up this compassion, building up empathy, building up even strategies for working towards recovery. So I think education in this field is something that is huge need of our times. I mean, of all times, but especially now with more and more prone to addictions. So I think education of what addictions are is something that's very important. And then that will lead to all the rest, compassion, empathy, and all that.
I totally agree that in today's world, education and spreading awareness is of utmost importance. It's quintessential in its own nature. Building that empathy is truly also important, and even for the family members to understand. So that's where my next
Yeah.
question comes into picture. Like, what it's challenging. I totally I can just imagine, and I agree with what you were saying, that it's really challenging for family members. But what are those early signs family members can identify in the journey of a person getting into that vicious trap of being an addict? So what are those early signs, and how can families navigate through those early signs and bring back the person?
There are many things to look out for. Like one could be compulsive behavior, right? Like I have to be doing this. Like it does not matter what the circumstances are, where I am, whatever, I have to do it. So the compulsive kind of behavior, obsessive kind of behavior, where it is, repeatedly, even if I'm not doing that, my thoughts are occupied constantly around that, right? Then withdrawal from spaces which are not really helping in that particular behavior, right? You're withdrawing from society, from your friend circle, from your social circle, because like let's say in case of alcoholism, if there is a party, you're invited to a dinner where there is no alcohol served, then I don't want to go, right? So withdrawing from spaces which are not really conducive behavior or that substance. Then work or your routine being affected, right? You're not able to function normally in your daily routines, daily, whether if it's a student, they're not able to study or go to college, or go to work when in cases of adults. So I think there are, I mean, a long list of things, and then there is a sudden behavior change, right? The sweetest of person, the kindest of person is somebody who's constantly irritable and not able to be that person who he or she originally was, right? And constantly telling lies, getting into trouble financially, borrowing money, stealing money. So there are, like, I mean, depending on the addiction and the circumstances, there are a long list of symptoms that. So I first thing I would say is something that has very drastically changed in terms of that person or that young adult or child or whoever it is. Yeah. Yeah, I think the family is able to see, right? This person was never like this, and now suddenly this person is very different. So what's going on? So trying to catch it as early as possible.
Just a follow up on this, given the current, fast paced lives and the way our families are going more nuclear, uh,
Mhm.
these behavioral changes are often neglected or overlooked. because let's just consider a scenario where a child is getting into an addiction, a teenager getting an addiction of alcohol or let's say smoking, and parents
Mhm.
are often busy with earning the bread for the family and providing that comfortable life to the child. And because of the busy schedule, they're not
Yeah, yeah,
able to really identify those signs, the early telltales. And when
yeah.
the addiction becomes a big scenario altogether, it has heightened and reached a particular place where it has started impacting the child's behavior to an extent that it's now coming out in the open. They start emotional turmoil, start victimizing the child or the person who has become addicted. How do we actually
Mhm.
navigate this thing? And secondly, how do we manage ourselves as well?
So I can't give you a very general answer, but because you brought up this topic of young children, right, like teenagers or young adults, and where the parents are the caretakers and responsible for the child in some way, then I feel very easy for us to replace or in some way say that substitute our time, the what we spend with them or how we are with them with other things like devices or giving them a lot of money to go party with friends, go out. So it's almost like I'm delegating this job to somebody else, right? So now there might be various things that are happening with me myself that I'm not able to be there for my child. So it doesn't mean that we leave everything and we are there for them 24/7. However, just being there and holding the space for the child is something that is very important, because it's one of the contributing factors sometimes, because the children are unsupervised, because the children feel okay, nobody is watching, so let me just do it, and then they get into that vicious cycle of not being able to break that cycle, right? So I think for parents especially, I think I don't want to say that you focus completely on your kids. That's absolutely not necessary. However, can we have a balance, right? Like where we are there for the other person, so the other person feels, the child feels that yes, there is somebody watching over me. There is somebody who is holding the boundaries for me. Because children, until they become, they say adults at 21, but I don't think even 21 they're completely adults. But they need somebody else, another adult, to hold the boundaries for them. So I think when it comes to parents, holding the boundaries, which is, not very tight, it does not mean that, extremely rigid, but it's a boundary which is shifting, right? And I know how much, for each child it is different, right? So that is something that with parenting, I think the biggest step would be that can you be there to hold the boundaries for your child until he or she is able to regulate that for himself. And when it comes to adults, also, now this is very, I'm going into an area, gray area, because I feel there are different kinds of addictions, right? Like if it is substance abuse, then it could be stemming out of a genetic predisposition. So then nobody around is really responsible for it. But then if it is a non-substance addiction, like we're talking about gaming, pornography, or constantly being on the phone, so there, I think it is the external environment which can be tweaked, which can be worked upon to, help the person. It's a very, very, addiction is a very, very general term. So I'm struggling to give something that is a, very simple, straightforward answer for this.
So, Sangeeta, what could be, the path to recovery, and how should the family help the addict navigate that path?
Yeah, sure. So when you talk about path to recovery, for me, this is a two-pronged approach. So path to recovery, not just for the addict, but also for the family. Yeah, I think we have discussed earlier that it is not just the addict who is affected, but also the family, the people who are around all the time. They become dysfunctional themselves, right? So the approach to recovery should be two-pronged. So there are organizations like Alcoholics Anonymous. These are support groups: Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Gamers Anonymous, Overeaters Anonymous. For like multiple addictions, there are support groups which are available. So Uh, Now, because we say support group, it is made up of individuals who have been, through those experiences themselves. And they have a wonderful program which is available for to help the addict, come out of this recovery, to recognize that I'm an addict, right? Like there could be social drinking and then there could be addictive drinking. How do I, really understand whether I'm an addict or I'm just a social drinker who's gone, a little bit overboard, right? So there are various organizations which are helping. These are support groups which are helping with this whole process. Now, the support groups for recovery are not only for the addict but also for the families of addicts. Like as I mentioned earlier, the families are sometimes more affected than the addict himself or herself, because the addict is so obsessed with the addiction that he or she is not really understanding of what's the circumstances or the consequences of his addiction. It's the family who faces this, and they become ill or dysfunctional too. So I think most of these support groups have recovery programs for the addicts and for the families of addicts. Then there are very individual counseling that is available. There are de-addiction centers. Like I mentioned earlier, I work with the families. I coach them. I do counseling for the families and for the addicts. So there are various spaces that are available. Now, the first step to be taken is to really get an understanding of, is this an addiction or is this just leading towards addiction?
Thanks a lot, Sangita, for sharing your own personal experiences and helping us understand how can we or families of addicts, navigate this complex and tough situation in their own life. Listeners, if you know anyone who is going through this tough situation or would like some support, please feel free to reach out to Sangita. We will be sharing her contact details in our descriptions across all the platforms where this podcast is getting published. And if you want our help in reaching out to her, more than happy, please DM us on our Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, wherever you're hearing this. Thanks a lot, Sangita, for coming on to this podcast.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Pulkit.